Good morning. It's an honor to come and share. I feel like I'm still a student here when I come back home to First Nations University of Canada. For the ones that don't know me, I'm just going to give you about a 28-minute briefing. No, I'm kidding. I only got 30 minutes here. I'm 36 years old. I was elected Chief of Cowessess First Nation when I was 34. I look young. That's that Cowessess Reserve water, why I look so young. I grew up on Cowessess First Nation, and it's a big part of governance when you govern something at how you know the common sense of what's going on. And growing up on Cowessess First Nation, I grew up there till I was about 20. I had to move away because my parents wouldn't allow me to shack up in their basement. And I dated the only 3 girls I wasn't related to on Cowessess. And I came to Regina to meet a Cowessess girl and take her back home with me as well when I moved back home. When I was 21 years old, I moved to Regina for higher learning education and also job opportunities. I didn't come here till I was 26 years old. For the first 5 years living in Regina, I just transitioned into the city life, learned how to adapt to the changes. I was so Cowessess-centric that my world going to Yorkton or Regina day trip for me was already overwhelming. The flow of the life beyond Cowessess was just too much to me. I just loved the tone of Cowessess and I just loved being home. So transitioning off the reserve was a cultural shock for me. And now that I'm chief today, I'm helping citizens on Cowessess pursue their opportunities the way that the nation helped me, because there's young ones out there that are going to be replacing myself one day. So I'm helping them the way that my nation helped me. You know you're deep from the nation when you got about 5 or 6 nicknames at home. Some of them are not too PG, so I can't share them with you. When I got to First Nations University of Canada, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be successful. I didn't really know what that meant. I had people like Richard, Murray Westerland, Dr. Bob Cowessess, a lot of people here kind of just reminded me that I had a voice. And I graduated here in 2013 with a business admin degree. I already kind of knew I wanted to be a chief. I just didn't tell anybody. I thought I was way too young, but everything I learned in class, I was like, why don't we do this at home? How come we're not doing this? So instead of just waiting for the next election, I started working with the council of the day. And I started saying, is there business plans? Is there things? So I started kind of just showing my interest at home and helping out where I can. I was a volunteer fanatic. When I was campaigning to be chief, I went to one of the elders' houses and he said, "You've been campaigning your whole life." He's like, "I knew you were going to be chief," he told me. And when he said that, I was thinking, I guess I kind of always am in the community, volunteering, doing things, stuff like that. When I kind of knew I wanted to be chief, I didn't know if I was ready. And I had one of 2 options. I could go to the iGov in Vancouver Island and take an Indigenous Master's program to strengthen the foundation on what Indigenous governance is. Or I could stay here in Regina in Treaty 4 to take the Johnson-Shiama School of Public Policy Master's program with a Master's of Public Administration. I started to think, if I wanted to be a great chief, then maybe I should know both sides of the coin. Because in 2018, Indigenous governance is our foundation. But there's one common theme we all do here in Treaty 4, and it's we share this land together regardless of your identity, regardless of where you call home, regardless of your who you are. And so I chose Johnson-Shiama School of Public Policy after going over and feeling and just didn't know if I was in the right place. I met Kathy, and she just made me feel welcomed and at home. And so I took the program and I graduated in 2016 with a Master's in Public Policy. And I was so prepared and over ready to be chief that I was elected the same month that I did my last class. So I was fresh out of school and transitioned into Chief of Cowessess First Nation. And I just wanted to give you that introduction because what I'm about to talk about is innovation. And you have all these gung-ho ideas. Every one of us in this room, when you leave a conference, you're like, I just feel inspired to bring this home. And then all of a sudden when the reality hits, when you're sitting in those meetings that make change, you don't prepare yourself sometimes for the reality of the challenges that are facing you. When I got elected as Cowessess First Nation, within the first 24 hours, I was just so excited. But when you show up to work as chief, you're sitting there, and Chief Councillor Pat always laughs with me. You sit there and you're like, okay, I got elected, now what? And it's like this wow feeling, eh? It's like, holy cow, you actually got elected. And you get all these ideas. And the second day of work, after all the celebration is done, they put 3 suitcases on the table. And they're all the unfinished business and problems that your nation has today. And they could be things like land issues, undeveloped policies, things that council did in the past that you inherited. And you don't really compensate all of those when you're thinking, oh, I got all these ideas, and when you're freshly elected. And so you have one of 2 options. You can tuck them under the tablecloth and just act like everything's all sunny and you just keep on going with your new ideas. Or you can open those suitcases with your elected officials and all your specialists around you, and you can put action plans to them. And you own those problems. Instead of just one thing you gotta remember is you inherit these things, but you can put blame on them and keep saying, oh, that was the past administration. Oh, that was 2 chiefs ago. Oh, that was... And then you feel better at the end of it. Or you could just say, you know what? We own these problems today. They are ours. Now let's put action plans to them. And with such a great council that was elected with me, that's what we did. We put all the issues on the table, and we started putting action plans to them. We started owning them. Instead of just saying, that's the government's fault, that's because they're not implementing treaty, that's because of passive... We didn't spend our energy like that. We just put action plans to them. As you move forward, some of those action plans create you not to be too popular. Because some of the things you're addressing, people that elected you, they're like, no, I don't want you to make that decision. I supported you. I didn't realize you were going to do this. So you got to make some defining decisions as you move forward, owning these problems. But I just want to give you a little image of coming in so gung-ho to a position, but then having the attitude to address it. At the end of the day, it's about the attitude. I want to name some of the things that every nation and organization has that you work with. Everyone has a tattletale. Everybody has a bully. Everybody has a joker. Everybody has a spy. Everybody has a stud. Everybody has a know-it-all. Everybody has a scrapper. Everybody has a wimp. Everybody has, I'm just coming for the food. Everybody has a nosy Parker. We all have that arts and crafts seller. And everybody has that person that's missing in action. Those are the characters that surround you, along with the professionals, that you cannot make decisions without assuring that they're at the table too. And you must go to their level and go into their understanding in order to make good decisions. And that's a tough thing to do. Especially your bullies, especially your ones who have a set agendas. How do you work with them instead of dividing and conquering the way this colonial government has been doing to the Indigenous people for the last 400 or 500 years? How do we not do what they're doing when we start to do it to our own organizations, our own nations? Those are realities that, as a great leader, that you have to understand. And they're tough. Sometimes you just gotta zip it and just listen and get criticized. And I just think of those penguins on Madagascar when you're done. Just smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave. That's all you can do at the end of the day. When I got elected, I have a lot of mentors. And one of them is Ovid Mercady. Ovid Mercady wrote a book called Into the Rapids. Recommended read. In there, he says the following. Act Indian instead of Indian Act. And that just stuck with me when I read that, because everything that we talk about governance today has a ripple effect from the Indian Act. And we're now 6-7 generations from 1876 that almost have come accustomed to the Indian Act. That's not what we do here. And you gotta step back, well, that's the Indian Act way. So Ovid said act Indian instead of Indian Act. And I remind myself of that. Sometimes even my own counsel will remind me of that. Saying, Chief, I think you're getting too schmoozhy with the INAC officials. You gotta act Indian, not Indian Act. And one of the things that you can image yourself on how to define this is, you think of the INAC government's camp. There's two kind of people that approach it. Ones that'll keep their teepee on the outside of their camp but will work with them. And then there's some that'll put their teepee right in the middle of their camp and just accept their policies and their ways. And that's just an image. It's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing. That's the reality of trying to work with governments that still their mandate is to assimilate and to fall under the legislation of Canada, which would go against our nation-to-nation agreements. So you just got to remember that. Those are things that you got to come to reality with when you're talking about governance. The other thing was Ogumau Fox. We were at this meeting, Wallace Fox from Onion Lake. And he walks up to the mic and we're talking about education. And he starts going like this to the mic. And he said, that's our battle song. When you go into these meetings, when you go into these forums with officials on the other side where they're mandated to implement the Indian Act and implement the colonized nations to put them under the Canadian government, remember our ancestors had a war song when they would go into battle. And even though we're not going into battle to physically hurt, we now go into battle in a governance perspective that this is for our children yet unborn. And you must hold to your foundation. And you sacrifice whatever you feel that you might give up personally to gain for the nation as a whole moving forward. And when he said that, it wasn't the battle that really stuck out to me. I started thinking of my ancestors and how they would approach this. If I was to just say, fictionally one day, go back 200 years ago, what would my ancestors tell me in the strategic governance level of how you approach people to work with? So I thought of that. I just wanted to share that. Those are two things that stuck out to me. So when we got elected, we assessed the nation. Cowessess First Nation. We assessed the nation. When you get elected, you can use that word for 6 months. People will say, what are you doing, Chief? What's the change? We're assessing the nation. So you got 6 months. If you're going to be elected or you are elected, you can use that for 6 months, and after that, it gets fatigued. So we're assessing the nation. Give us time. We're assessing the nation. And as we were assessing the nation, you can have quick wins. You can find really quick wins out there and make it look like you're just doing deadly and amazing, but don't focus on the quick wins. You got to focus on the foundational long-term goals. And one of the things we noticed in Cowessess was we have, if you look at it as a house, if you can image governance as a house, you have nice shingles, you got nice windows on your house, and people who come up and say, oh, nice house, it's really nice. But if your foundation is not strong, your constitution, your acts, your governance, your policies, the way people react to your policies, the way your elected officials implement your policies, then your house is not strong at all. You just have an image that you're good, but your foundation is not strong. So when we were assessing, we realized Cowessess was good. We were probably a little above average if you were to compare us in regards to how much policies and acts and that we have. But internally, our foundation wasn't the greatest yet. So that was just an assessment. I'm just talking about the assessment. The second thing is the overloading of our administration in the government, in the governance. Every councillor had a portfolio. And under that portfolio was a manager And under those managers was the staff. Now I'm going to go back up to the top. Every portfolio had a counselor in it. And that counselor was the manager of that department. An elected official was automatically the manager in the system at the time. They would tell the manager would ask them for permission, they would tell the manager would ask them for permission. Sometimes the council would forget to tell the other council, and there were silos. And so the manager became the assistant to the counselor, and the counselor was making approvals on budget, they were making approvals on staff overtime, was sometimes not even going to the budget and looking if it's in the budget. It was throwing off the governance, and it was overloading the vehicle of administration. The council were in the vehicle. The citizens, every complaint went into the vehicle. And here you are, where our great program managers in our nations that are trying to drive the vehicle are just trying to manage a real packed Indian car going to the powwow. And how do you expect to have long-term growth administratively when your elected officials are playing a role when they should actually be playing another role? And that was because of one thing. Because in 1876, when the Indian Act came in, what came with it was an Indian agent. And in Cowessess, the Indian agent stayed there till 1971. We actually had a farewell party for our Indian agent. And some of the elders at home were even there. They remember how great of a party it was. They said it was a good... But you got to think, in 1971, that style of bottleneck administration lead, that's what some of our administration, where we were actually being Indian agents at some point, just telling politically everything, micromanaging and all that. And this was a tough thing. Council and myself, some councillors and myself, didn't agree to this. But I asked them, let's give it a try. And I explained to them. And so we did. And so council stopped being portfolio holders. And then we created this whole new thing of what they should be focusing on. And the first couple of months was kind of weird for our managers, because all of a sudden their powwow car wasn't so packed with people telling them what to do. All of a sudden they actually were driving. And all of a sudden they could look in the rear view mirror and they made the decision. They made the decision on the dashboard of how much budget was in there, how much policy was being there. Dashboard was all of them. And now today we're in year 2 of it, and the program managers absolutely love it at home. But this is the challenge, capacity building challenge, is council and myself, we're on the sideline trying to figure out what governance is. But right now, it's tough because some of us want to go back in there because that's the only system we knew. So we're in only year 2. We're still at introduction. There's still a lot of growing pains. There's still a lot of cases that we're going through. But it's working. And it's really exciting. I love going into programs now just to say hi and just to let them know that the chief's here. I'm not a Sasquatch. You don't just hear about me. I'm actually here. And just to let them know that we support them. The next thing is when we were done assessing, we started defining our dependency. If you want to talk about governance, just go home and ask your organization, how much are you dependent? This is more for First Nations. How much are you dependent on the government? You can talk a solid game about governance all day long. But right now, Cowessess First Nation, we're 30% independent, 70% dependent on government funding. That fiduciary obligation will always be there, but a nation should be at its independent line. So we run a $15 million operation at home, and we depend on the government, meaning that when we're sitting there talking government-to-government negotiation, the government will actually use that against nations. Well, we're going to throw you in third party if you don't sign this funding agreement. And you're like, oh, I don't really agree with the agreement because your SA policy is keeping my people in the bowl. Well, it is what it is, Chief. And so that's what I mean. Then you got nations like Thunderchild or Onion Lake. where they do have the funds to be independent, but they understand the fiduciary obligations. The government does fund them, but when they're at the table, they have that political strength to work without the fiduciary, and then they're going to say, we're going to sue you for not giving us our fiduciary obligation. So nations have to have that independent line, so you should be doing check marks with that. So what do council do? I'm just waiting, I want to talk about one more thing before I get to that. As we transitioned, instead of everybody coming to chief and council for direction, you don't want your staff and everybody coming to the chief's office. Chief, you think I can stay till 5 p.m.? Well, it's really not my decision. You've got a program manager, you should go ask them. Chief, everything always hits the chief's office. And, I use these, I'll sit there and listen to them, then I'll give them direction. Well, you should actually go ask this person for that, but thank you for sharing. We surrounded ourselves with 6 positions. So we're starting to move into a board structure where we are the board of the nation. I'm the tribal chair of the board. The council are the decision makers. I work with the council. I treat all 8 councillors the same. Some of them I talk more with than others, but it doesn't mean that I have any favoritism. I treat them all the same. As the chief, you have the loneliest job on the nation, because even your own family you've got to say no to. Sometimes your councillors will ask for things and I've got to tell them no. And I always tell them, if I tell you no, you can bring it to the team and ask for a yes, but I'm just telling you no because that's what my role is here. So you always got to have that redress. But we have 6 positions that directly take direction from us. Our executive director, which oversees administration. So run this fine line. The executive director oversees administration. All program managers and all staff will go through her. She comes to our table. The next thing is, the other side of the line is governance, and that's nation navigator. The nation navigator is your governance coordinator. They work with council on administrative levels. This is totally new. We haven't even really began this process. It's actually posted right now. So if anybody wants to come work for Cowessess, Nation Navigator only focuses on the governance. So that's your defining line between administration and governance. The next one is your Director of Finance. Director of Finance, make sure that that 15 million is all accounted for, that it's being implemented, that our bylaw is being implemented, that policies are being followed, that budgets are being followed. The next thing we have is your Executive Assistant, which is the greatest workers in every organization. They make you look amazing. They don't get thanked enough, but we have an amazing executive assistant. The next one is our economic development project manager. Because we just are not at our business corp level yet, we have a lady, our executive, she's our economic development. So every time somebody comes to Cowessess wanting to do economic development, she comes and does the admin for us. So what I'm trying to give you an image of is these 6 positions all have briefing note templates that have to come to council with briefing notes for us to make final decision. Because the most powerful meeting in a First Nation is a duly called chief and council meeting. But if your council are making decisions just because something was posted on Facebook and they're reading it and saying, I want to bring this to the floor, if there's no briefing note assigned to it, that's like making a purchase and not keeping your receipt. As to a briefing note is a receipt in governance. And I learned that in the Johnson Shiama. We had to do so much briefing notes. I was just so fatigued of briefing notes. And I found out that the province does it different than the federal government. So Cowessess, we have our own briefing note. And so briefing notes are mandatory coming to the chambers. And then what we do is we bring it to the floor. I'm the chair. I ask for a mover, seconder, Robert's Rules of Order, and it's passed. But all 6 positions must vet it to us with a briefing note. So they're a filter to make sure. And then they have people that they look after. So you're still governing the nation. You're just not doing the Indian agent style of just, micromanage the administration. And we separated governance from administration. So lastly, is being communication with your citizens. This is the toughest one. You can be a very transparent nation, but there's always those ones out there that will just try and call you out on something. Just focus on the negative. And that's that intergenerational trauma that we deal with in all of our nations. It's just consistent. But instead of fighting it, instead of having an ego towards it, we have to become humble to it and understand that there's a bigger issue to deal with than their complaint. There's reasons why people are angry. And we can't stop. We've got to stop being Kiam and looking the other way. We've got to start addressing why some of our people have anger issues or have issues where they just can't get over it. And so when people complain, the inboxes, I get about 50 Facebook inboxes a day, and I just give them direction. I try not to leave them hanging. I will try and give them direction on who to go talk to. But what we do in Cowessess is we post our minutes from our duly called meetings in a public place. So decisions that we make, we're accountable to them, so people can come in and read our duly called minutes. The second thing we do is we live stream all of our public meetings. Because Cowessess has 4,259 citizens, 900 live on the reserve, the rest are nomadically throughout North America and beyond. They can now watch every one of our public meetings if they have internet. And people ask why Cowessess is such a big nation. It's because we're sexy and we know it. So what should counselors do? What is the role of your chief and council in a nation? Now this is a trying time for Cowessess, because I'm going to tell you again, I got counselors in the room. I'm very proud of where I come from and my counselors that are teamed up with me. We agree to disagree. And that's the reality. That's good governance. When you agree to disagree, I'm glad. I surround myself with people that don't tell me what I want to hear. They tell me what I need to hear. And the council included. I make sure council have their own voice, that there's no political agenda, there's no log rolling, whatever you want to call it. But what counselors is you're governing the nation. You're elected to govern the nation. You can make all these promises. I love reading pamphlets now that I'm a chief. I read their pamphlets when they're running, saying, sorry, big guy, you can't promise that. That's unreal. But as a chief, you don't really know that until you're a chief and you read it. But a counselor has a portfolio called citizen enhancement. Take a snapshot of the people in your organization or your nation, and how much are dependent on welfare, how much need training, what do they need, what's the economy around your area, what kind of jobs are out there. Citizen enhancement. Lift your people to know what training tools they need to be independent. Decolonization. Huge one. They say colonization was tough on our people. Decolonizing is even more tough, because we've lost so much that some of us are actually trying to make it up. And that's really tough to deal with. Because you're sitting there saying, I don't go to that pipe ceremony, that person that doesn't pray in the right way. I'm just trying to have prayer here with everybody. I don't know the background. You're trying to, decolonization portfolio. A counselor's responsibility is to go out there, find funding and people to bring language back. Foundational language. Everybody should walk in this life with a prayer and a song. Because you don't know when you're going to be standing in the middle of somewhere all alone, afraid, and your ancestor's song is just going to come to your mind, and that song is just going to calm you down. Or that prayer where you can just pray at any moment you can. That's decolonization. That's things that are interpersonal in everybody. The next one is community planning. Everybody should have community planning. What infrastructures you got? What are people doing? Where do you need paths for people to walk? Stuff like that. A counselor is responsible for that. Inherent and treaty rights are foundation. Inherent and treaty rights are huge. We got to know what our inherent rights are, what our treaty rights are. Even that is a tough conversation at home right now, because we're talking about it. People are coming to say, you can't evict me. A house is my treaty right. Well, yeah, but everybody has to pay a little bit, like that. Those are realities that you have to deal with, but you have to start those conversations. The next one is stewards of the land. People knocking on Cowessess, Oh, line 3 is coming through. Cowessess, here's our duty to consult. What do you think? And we're like, whoa, let's hang on here. What's going on? So a councillor is responsible for stewards of the land, water, and air. A councillor is responsible for special projects. We want a new community hall. We want to revamp our old school. Community special project. There's economic opportunity. Those are special projects. A councillor is responsible for that. Governance strategy. There should be a councillor that just, is the lead on the governance. And lastly, finance and admin. That's the closest administration should get to our table, is we have a finance and admin committee made up of chief and council, and staff and program managers can bring their briefing notes, sit in our circle, everybody has the same voice, and they explain their briefing note to us. And so then we're like, okay, sure, let's pass it in motion, bring it to the duly called meeting. So then that way your duly called meeting isn't just jam-packed all day. All someone says is, well, here's the Finance and Admin Committee motions. Read them all out. Do an ombudsman, whatever you call it. Vote. Okay, those are all good. It really frees up your duly called meeting to be board member ready. So those are some of the things, but I'm just going to finalize by talking about challenges. Lack of capacity is huge in First Nation country. This is totally something different that Cowessess is trying. My council respect me enough to say, Chief, I'll give it a try, even though I don't agree with you. And so the first year was pretty all right. Year 2 now, I got councillors trying to sneak back into portfolios now. Because for the whole year, they were just on the sideline saying, what do you want me to do? That's how I look, that's how I view what leadership is. And we're like, no, you've got all these portfolios that now we focus on. So capacity, we don't have funding from government to bring people in and help us bring this up to a whole new level. The next thing is governance is both an art and a science. Remember this. Science is simple. You can read all these policy books, go get all your masters, your undergrad. That's the science of it. Bring in all these gurus. Everybody can think of the science, but the art is the common sense. You should have as much common sense as science in your governance. Every nation is different. Cowessess is different than Cowessess. Cowessess is different than Fishing Lake. So you've got to have both an art and a science to it. The next thing is capacity building in regards to generation difference. Under 21-year-olds in Cowessess, they have certain needs and wants. They want higher education. They want to do sports. They want to keep busy. They don't want to do drugs and alcohol. Then your 22 to 54-year-olds, they want a job. They want training. They want to go to university. You're 55 plus. They want you to look after them. They're going to get older. They're sick. They're scared. They don't want to just be put in a home one day and just left there. So when you're making governance decisions, every age category has different needs and wants, and you've got to bring those into it. And lastly is, I just want to end off by, Jamie's leaving the 1 minute about 5 minutes ago here. I just want to let you know that I absolutely love being a chief. I think it's just such a great honor, but it's not an elevation to power. It's a submission to duty. And one of my counselors told me that when I was running for chief. And there's a lot of intergenerational trauma that we deal with in our nations, and we must address that first. If you don't address the intergenerational trauma, all the other great things you're doing won't really matter, because your people won't buy into it. Intergenerational trauma is huge in First Nations country. I'm the first generation out of 4 to not attend residential school. I sit around my kitchen table, and the reality is I respond differently than my mom and my grandparents do to certain things, because they have anger and bitterness, and something happened. It didn't happen to me, but sometimes they're spilling it on to me as if it did, and that's intergenerational trauma. And it's really tough to go into a community and ask your elders to stop being so negative about certain things, or to quit, being almost borderline bullies if they're adults. Because I love all day spending time with youth because they have no issues to give to me but just opportunity. But the moment I work with my adults and my elders, I tell you, I'm just fatigued by 11 a.m. because of the intergenerational trauma that is alive and well in our nations. And as an elected official, there's young people coming out of this school excited to be a chief, excited to be a counselor. But I guarantee you, if they don't know what they're about to encounter with intergenerational trauma, they won't last in one term. Because you manage poverty, you manage so many different things, and I learned to almost become numb to that. But at the same time, I also learned to still make sure my heart is involved in it. Because that's the reality of governance. You can have all these great institutions and foundations, but you have to address, and you don't have to be an elected official to address that in a nation either. But the conversation has to come, it has to be polite, it has to be professional, and once you address that, you'll just be amazed at how much your nation will walk with you. And that's the foundation of governance. So thank you very much for letting me share. Couldn't ask him